Chile here with Sirius Talis Moon, and it's Venus hour, actually Jupiter night, and Venus is 7 degrees Leo, Jupiter is 17 degrees Cancer, and the Moon is 14 degrees Sagittarius. So, with Rahu in Pisces, there is accentuation of and even culmination of themes that have been running since 2012 around people learning to, first of all, acknowledge the realm beyond the physical. Whether it's medical, whether it's spiritual, whether it's religious, okay, and I know that this religious is an incredibly triggering word, whether it's positive experiences, whether it's psychic attacks, or what people call spiritual warfare. And in this time, everybody is, of course, free and should be free to take their own course within the way they express or the trajectory that they take with that. And that is as long as, of course, they are respectful of other people's sovereignty. And this is exactly the importance, the emphasis on that trajectory. Pisces is indeed both an isolation, a sign of isolation, but also of something that is global and all-encompassing. And when it comes to understanding the realm beyond the physical, it can be the dream state, it can be the afterlife, it can be mediumship, it can be psychology, psychiatry, it can be religion. I will open and say, in my academic work, I looked at a comparative study between China, Russia, and the United States on the topic of training to have extrasensory perception. Whether people achieve that through embodiment and meditation, which is basically how it is achieved, okay? Or it happened to them through trauma and fragmentation. And I did talk about the fact that in September eclipses, one of my predictions is that the outcome of this eclipse might not be just this month, but we're going to run into an intelligence crisis that is going to even be a life and death information that is needed, that only a person that has learned channeling in a process of embodiment rather than trauma and fragmentation will have the missing link of. And what's important to understand is that trauma and fragmentation create, yes, extrasensory perception, and in both cases there is less of a somatic experience. One is reached through dissociation, the other through embodiment. And so that which is through dissociation is reached with trauma and fear. That which is with embodiment is more centered. And I understand that at this time there are a lot of people who are escaping spiritual warfare into whatever the equivalent of deliverance prayers they have, and indeed there are a lot of satanic ritual abuse survivors that verses from the Bible or began to actually resonate, and that's okay. Everybody has their path. However, because the rituals were done, for example, with Christianity, Inquisition, practically, historically, how Christianity, that was, nobody can ignore that. We may connect with whatever, Christ and so on, but nobody can ignore how Christianity was spread or how Islam was spread. And yes, with Judaic traditions there are perhaps other problems. And so what's important is to try and get to the essence. Let's say if you didn't know, I will say that way. Let's say if you didn't know the name of Jesus, if you didn't know the name of Moses, if you didn't know the name of Ushun, how would you describe and how would you discern that which is to you the deliverance or the divine or the actual information? And this is something that I would do a little bit with my students, because those types of exercises, like showing them the questions of the exam in the first class, and then all of them when it's open, so when everybody can look at that, the different types of courses. And another trick would be, if you didn't have the terminology, it's one of the best exercises to understand the subject. If you didn't know what to name that, how would you describe that? Because what is trying to mimic that will come in many names. And in any religion, even if you go the route of religion, any religion, it sometimes takes exile to rejuvenate the teachings. We can see it with Maimonides, with the Sufis, we can see it with the apostles, and Jesus himself, every prophet. And those things, just like when you do science in academia. When I first started started studying, the first degree I began to study before my later academic work was in the Department of Filmmaking. And in filmmaking, it was very obvious. You have a creative idea, but to make a movie, you need to fund for it. With science, it is less addressed. Actually, my thesis was touching on that, but particularly with the medicine and philosophy of science. And I was aiming to remove the funding, i.e. the politics of the funding, out of the question and observe the truth. And it was one of the, I was basically doing preparation for a thought experiment. My PhD was supposed to be a thought experiment. I knew only one person from my department that did a thought experiment, also philosopher. He was brutally murdered in 7th of October in his village. And he got accepted to do PhD without having to return to do another MA in, I think, Washington. And so from him I know that it's very rare that people actually get to do thought experiment. And the thought experiment that I did with myself when I wrote my thesis proposal was very simple. What is the truth? Put everything put the economy aside, put the politics aside, put the fundings aside. What is the truth? And when you do that thought experiment, what is not the truth begins to fall like a tower of cards. It's a process, and then discernment becomes easier. You see, you can take one shot, and then you have side effects. Then they tell you to get another shot. So you go to the doctor, say, I have this and that side effects. They say, oh, it's probably not from the shot. The side effects are screaming out loud for a person that's been a decade with the same family doctor. Scientifically, or when a patient receives a pill, begins to have side effect, doctor says not from the pill, which is, by the way, an unprofessional declaration. You can never say it's not from the pill. It's unscientific. You need to test for to see. Then I tell, okay, let's take the C factor out of the equation. Let's try to see if a patient, let's say, is hospitalized. Let's try to see them without the pill. They're hospitalized, no problem, without the pill, and see if it's from the pill. The doctor tells me one thing: I cannot keep this patient in the hospital unless they take the pill. You see, science has a tendency to collapse unscientific structures. Now, when we talk about discernment, the question is not your religion. The question is, if you didn't have the terminology, what would make that teaching benefic to you? And I cannot answer this for you. And so in time of spiritual warfare, to constrain to one or another religion, which is a set of theosophical terminologies to describe the divine spiritual experience, gnosis, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, you say, oh, that's redundant. Well, when people, how should I say, when people are spiritually gaslighted, which is what happens in cults. When people are spiritually gaslighted, you see, the Church of Satan, for example, it doesn't teach you the Bible like other types of Christianity. So how do you know that this teaching is good for you? One good thought experiment is, does it make sense? And sense, I mean here not just the five senses. Does it make sense consistently? Can you humanly abide by this sense? Most religions take upon their tickets to society is feeding people, feeding people's souls. Okay, usually people don't pick up a Bible every day. They pick up a Bible, unless they're very religious, they pick up, or whatever the equivalent or a scripture, they pick up a Bible when they are in trouble, or when they want something that they want to get in life. And so, to bridge if I try to bridge the experience from people that have been either studying theosophy for many, many years, or philosophy for many, many years, or getting into occultism and channeling work for many, many years, and these people, they have their path, they know their path. And the common people that deal with spiritual warfare and don't even know that that's spiritual warfare, so they can end up at the psychiatrist, they can end up at the witch, okay, religious or not, they can end up on Google, okay, researching, they can end up trying to at the neurologist, okay, and there can be many names for what they experience. And for these people, they said, try deliverance prayer. And they say, okay, let's try. This is how, in ritual satanic abuse, they taught them to pray to Satan, that Satan is a savior. Same experience, putting people through torture, pray to Jesus, infant dead, pray to Satan, Satan will save you. And when it's done to children, then it's very, very difficult. And one thing that I can talk about when it comes to those things that the world is dealing with today is a love that is actually loving. And for every person is their definition of what is a love that is actually loving. Actually, Corinthians 13:4 is a good example, okay? But not because it's written in the Bible. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not boast, it seeks no records of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. So if you speak the truth and people do not rejoice, not love. If you're surrounded by people who delight in evil, not love. If you are met with a sense of urgency, not love. So this is what I can say. It's written in the Bible. For me, it could be written in a tabloid. It works. It's true. It is a good filter. It always protects, always trusts. Always trusts is a bit questionable. When do you gain the trust? How do you sustain the trust? Protects, what is protects? And, okay, because care and control, and it's up to people to be discerning about that. So even if it's written in the scriptures, it's written in the Bible, okay, does it work? In the Bible, there are two times where they talk about the teeth of the sons rotting for the sins of the father. Both Jeremiah and Yechezkel. I looked this up. And they basically lived in a time where if the father was eating unripe fruit, which basically means they raped children, then the teeth of the son of their sons would begin to rot, because their sons began to also do the same. And both Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel called to change that, and said the father will die for their sins, they will pay for the sins. But the children, they won't pay for father's sins. If they sin, they will pay for their sin. And in that way, the sins of generations are actually bigger. I read that today on Google. And so, now, you can ask yourself, does it make sense for you? Because this shows of a change in moral standards in the Bible. When Pluto ingressed to Aquarius, I said this is exactly that time. And I don't know, I'm not, it's just like gut feeling. And when 7th October started, I said, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. Now, I did not remember the context of this sentence. Jesus literally said that on the cross. I didn't know that. Because the Jews were going to sacrifice them or something. Democide, no. So, and but I did not mean it like Jesus. Jesus meant that he was going to sacrifice himself for the sins of people. This is how they interpret him in the Bible. Google. Haven't checked in ChatGPT because there is an AI mass psychosis, which is fascinating. I knew Saturn Neptune is going to be mass psychosis. But you know what I think about psychosis if you watch my channel. And it's actually scientifically proven, because if you take psychotic people and you give them a house and you begin to believe what they tell you, they begin to recover. No, no class lawsuits won. Substances needed. So there's nothing more scientific. Open dialogue, housing first, and adjusting the environment to the patient. If you try to adjust the patient to the environment and the environment is getting Nazified and the rules stop making sense, then you can't blame the patient for being psychotic. It's not the patient that's like. But the AI factor was definitely fascinating, the AI psychosis. It's not just ChatGPT, they can upload the nervous system of people to a computer, and then um, they do dumb fuckery things with that. So, upon looking at those spiritual warfares, if deliverance prayer, and that was when, there was a question about Archangel Michael. So it's pretty much the same answer. And it's important to call upon discernment, just like we call upon discernment when we receive channeling. Also, call upon discernment when you're being put in a torturous situation. Call upon discernment, because it's like creating the problem and then giving you the solution that they want. And ask yourself, is this solution actually good for you? And there's no one answer. Okay, some people being pragmatic. I have my grandfather from my father's side. The family was Dutch. In fact, the family was so Dutch that they may have thought my mother was a witch, so they put garlic. Tried to scare her away. The father, he looked Jew. And in Europe, some people had to convert to Judaism, to Christianity. And some people even had to convert to Judaism with the ritual abuse. That's the part that they don't tell people. They had to participate in Jewish rituals, but also Christian rituals. I talk about ritual abuse. And so um, sometimes people had to be practical. They had to say, okay, my grandfather, he lived in Sarne at the Second World War next to Kiev. Now Kiev is burning again. And one day it was Poland, one day it was Germany, and then the other day he had to run and escape to Italy after the gate of the ghetto was opened. There was a rebellion. That's how he said. Talked about it one time. And then they went out, many people were shooting at them. So, but in the cases where it's kind of like, okay, hail Jesus, fine, hail Jesus. It's the costumes of those people that one has to make a pragmatic decision. Bless me. And this is why it's good to tend to satanic ritual abuse, because then you hear survivors, so you know it was done with the Jesuits, it was done with the Mormons, it was done with the Muslims, done in Nachlaut with the Jews. And it's not about being a heretic. Okay, you open the Bible, there's some interesting stuff there, there's some creepy stuff there, there's some outdated stuff there. And this is why I said the Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel were talking about, hey, that thing with the sins of the father, the children pay for that, no longer good. No longer will we have to do that. Which also entails to debt and intergenerational debt. From indigenous religions, I don't know the cultures well enough to represent or to discuss them. So I don't bring example because I'm not of these religions, not because I don't acknowledge that indigenous religions exist. So here again, there are ideas that are good for one time and not good for another time. And the world being put in traumatic situation doesn't mean that they have to take one road. Sovereignty still needs to be respected. So all in all, you can hear from all religions and pick your own practices. And again, as long as you respect the other people and all of their sovereignties, then you're not a cult. If you disrespect, the telltale for a cult is that there are, yes, sorry Jews, I have ancestors Jews. If you believe some are master race and the others should serve them, that's the Masonic rites. They believe that they believe that not everybody can be free. I did not know that until I was working with the talisman, and that had to do with Genesis, the creation of the world, the chart of creation of the world. And I ran into, I was looking, what is magnum opus? So there was the title of a book that was basically, it was a mistake in the title, but the book described the 33 open teachings of the 33 degrees of the Masonry, and then into some Opus Dei stuff. Later, Opus Dei was accused in human trafficking and so on. Before Pluto ingressed into Aquarius, and even though I have family in the Masons, I'm not in the Masons, I said, get out of the lodges if you can. Get out of the lodges if you can. That's the time in history where they persecute the lodges. And so what can I say? But the belief that not everybody can be free is a telltale for a cult. If you hold that belief, then you're more susceptible to being mind controlled.